Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. In the previous session, we talked about the steps of hemostasis and we discussed about the clot formation mechanisms in detail. And we also talked about the fibrous organization of the clot and we also talked about the coagulation test. Today, it's the fourth lecture of hemostasis, and today we are going to talk about the different disorders of hemostasis. In this regard, we are going to talk about two group of disorders. First, we are going to discuss the conditions that cause excessive bleeding, and then we are going to talk about the thromboembolic conditions, or in which there is excessive blood clotting. So first, we are going to start with the bleeding disorders or the conditions which can cause prolonged bleeding. Now, excessive bleeding can result in different conditions. Different disorders can include hemophilia, vitamin K deficiency, thrombocytopenia, which is the platelet deficiency. So these are three disorders which can result in excessive bleeding. Again, I am repeating, hemophilia is one condition or disorder, then vitamin K deficiency, and then third is the thrombocytopenia, which is the platelet deficiency. We are going to discuss these three disorders in detail one by one. First, we are going to talk about hemophilia. You must be familiar with the hemophilia. It is a congenital disorder of bleeding which exclusively occurs in male. The congenital disorder which exclusively occurs in male. The reason is that it is an X-linked recessive disorder. Since male have only one X chromosome, so if the X chromosome is defective, the male is going to have the disease. But females usually do not have the disease, but they act as carrier. It is because of the fact, since it's a recessive trait, it is a recessive disorder. So for a female to have the disease, she should have both X chromosome defective. Both the genes on the genes on both X chromosomes should be defective. Then the female is going to have the disease. And if only one X chromosome is defective, then females are going to act as carrier, which means the female carriers are going to transmit the disease to half of their male offsprings, and they are going to transmit the carrier state to the half of their female offsprings. Now coming to the types of hemophilia. There are three types of hemophilia: hemophilia A, hemophilia B, and hemophilia C. The most common type of hemophilia is hemophilia A. In hemophilia A, it is due to deficiency of factor 8. If clotting factor 8 is deficient, then this is known as this results in hemophilia A. It is a severe form of the disease and is also known as classic hemophilia. Then the second type is hemophilia B. In about 85% of the patients of hemophilia, there is deficiency of factor 8 and it is hemophilia A, type A. But in about 15% of the patients of hemophilia, there is deficiency of the clotting factor 9, which is also known as Christmas factor, and this is known as hemophilia B. So it is the second most common type of the hemophilia, and the disease in this case is of moderate severity. It is also sometimes known as Christmas disease because the other name for factor 9 is Christmas factor or anti-hemophilic factor B, due to which it is called as hemophilia type B. Then there is a third type of hemophilia which is called as hemophilia C. It's a milder form of the disease and it can occur due to deficiency of factor 11, which is also known as anti-hemophilic factor C. So these are the three types of hemophilia. The most common is type A, hemophilia A or classic hemophilia. So classic hemophilia or hemophilia A occurs due to deficiency of factor 8. Now factor 8, it has two components, a small component and a larger component. It is the deficiency of the smaller component of factor 8 which results in hemophilia A. Again I am repeating, hemophilia A occurs because of deficiency of factor 8. Now factor 8, it has two components, a smaller component and a larger component. The deficiency of smaller components results in hemophilia A, and if there is deficiency of larger component of factor 8, it will result in a disease known as von Willebrand disease, which has different characteristic features. Now hemophilia is characterized by a prolonged coagulation, and there is a lifelong tendency for excessive hemorrhages or bleeding. Remember that in case of hemophilia, bleeding usually does not occur spontaneously except in this most severe form of the diseases, but usually in case of hemophilia, bleeding occur after a trauma. But the degree of trauma which can cause excessive bleeding is usually very mild. So mild trauma can result in severe bleeding. Now this is the pathophysiology of the hemophilia, and the comparison with the normal. So whenever there is injury to the blood vessel, the physiological responses in the body are stimulated. There is vasospasm and there is activation of clotting factors. And these activation of clotting factors as well as the activation of platelets results in the formation of a clot that will seal the defect and it will secure hemostasis. But in case of hemophilia, there is deficiency of clotting factor 8. So, as a result, there will be delay in the process of clotting, and there will be a prolonged bleeding from the cut, and there is also formation of a clot which is usually weak. So, there is prolonged bleeding and there is severe bleeding from even smaller or minor cuts. Now, the clinical features. Since it's a congenital disorder, so the signs and symptoms begin to appear when the babies are about 6 months old, when they begin to crawl. So when they begin to crawl, there is easy bruising because mild trauma will cause rupture of the vessel, and there will be a prolonged bleeding, and it will result in formation of bruises. And when the babies begin to move about, trauma will result in excessive bleeding. Mild trauma will result in excessive bleeding. Now, usually in case of hemophilia, there is bleeding into the joints. So, there can be bleeding into the knee joint, elbows, ankle, and the hips. And due to bleeding into the joints become painful and swollen. In addition, there can be bleeding in the mucous membranes, or there can be bleeding from the gums, lips, and there can be bleeding in the internal organs like in the brain and the kidney. And there can also be epistaxis, that is bleeding from the nose, and there can be formation of muscle hematoma due to bleeding into the muscles. So these are the features which are exhibited by patients suffering from hemophilia. Now this diagram shows us the features of hemophilia. Again, I am repeating that this is an inherited disorder, and classical hemophilia is because of deficiency of factor 8, and it is also called as hemophilia type A. So as we just discussed, that bleeding can occur into the brain, intracranial hemorrhages can be there can be epistaxis, prolonged nosebleeds can be there is easy bruisability as a result of mild trauma, and bleeding into the joints may result in warm, painful and swollen joints, and there is decreased movements. Okay? And then there can be bleeding into the gastrointestinal tract. Now due to gastrointestinal hemorrhages, this can result in tarry stools, which is due to presence of blood in the stools, and there can be coffee ground emesis, that is dark brown color of vomiting because of bleeding in the stomach, and bleeding in the kidney, within the kidney, can result in cola colored urine, again because of presence of blood in the urine. Now regarding the treatment, one should remember that there is no cure. There is no cure of the disease, but we can take some precautionary measures like to take care to avoid injury and avoid the medicines that can promote bleeding, which means prolong the bleeding time, or sorry, which can prolong the process of clotting of blood. And good nutrition, good dental hygiene, and IV administration of the deficient clotting factor. Like in case of classical hemophilia, if there is deficiency of factor 8, so we have to give factor 8 by IV administration. So treatment is to give injections of purified factor 8. Now talking about hemophilia B, in about 15% of the patients, there is deficiency of factor 9 instead of deficiency of factor 8, and this case is known as hemophilia B, and it's a moderate form of the disease having the same clinical features as those of the hemophilia A. And in the difference is that in case of hemophilia B, there should be the infusion of factor 9. Treatment is to give infusion of factor 9 because in case of hemophilia B, there is deficiency of factor 9 or the Christmas factor. Now, clotting profile in hemophilia. When we go for the clotting profile in patients of hemophilia, we obtain the following profile or following results. The bleeding time is normal. This is because of the fact that in case of patients of hemophilia, the platelet count and function is normal, so bleeding time will be normal. There is prolongation of the clotting time because of deficiency of the clotting factor, factor 8 or in case of classic hemophilia, and factor 9 and factor 11 in case of other types of hemophilia, which are type B and type C. Prothrombin time is normal, but there is prolongation of the activated partial thromboplastin time. Next is vitamin K deficiency. Now, deficiency of vitamin K can also cause prolonged bleeding. This is because of depressed formation of the clotting factors by the liver. In our previous sessions, we have discussed that most of the clotting factors are formed in the liver. So, if there is a liver disease, a chronic liver disease like cirrhosis of liver, can also cause defective formation of the clotting factors, or if there is deficiency of vitamin K, it can also result in defective clot formation because vitamin K is required for the formation of a certain clotting factors including the prothrombin, which is factor 2, factor 7, factor 9 and factor 10. As we have already discussed that vitamin K is required for carboxylation of the glutamate residues of these clotting factors, which are clotting factor 2, 7, 9 and 10. And if there is deficiency of the if there is deficiency of vitamin K, these coagulation factors in the blood will be insufficient, and this will lead to a serious bleeding tendencies. Now the question is how the vitamin K deficiency can occur. It is very important to remember that dietary deficiency of vitamin K usually does not occur. This is because of the fact that vitamin K is synthesized within the intestine because of the action of the bacterial flora. So dietary deficiency does not occur, and deficiency occur as a result of lack of absorption of vitamin K. Vitamin K is a fat soluble vitamin, and it is absorbed from the gastrointestinal tract along with other fats and fat soluble vitamins due to through the bile. So if there is lack of secretion of bile into the gastrointestinal tract, either due to liver disease or due to obstruction of the bile duct, there will be lack of absorption or depressed absorption of vitamin K, and there will be deficiency of vitamin K in the body, leading to defective formation of the clotting factors 2, 7, 9 and 10. Now the treatment in this case is to give the injection of vitamin K to all surgical patients with liver disease about 4 to 8 hours before surgery. Now, injection of vitamin K will cause a sufficient formation of clotting factors so that it will prevent excessive bleeding during the surgical procedure. Now, the next condition that can cause prolonged bleeding is thrombocytopenia. Thrombocytopenia is decreased count of platelets. Reduced thrombocyte count is known as thrombocytopenia. There can be different causes for thrombocytopenia. It can occur as a result of bone marrow disorders, which is the defect of formation of the thrombocytes. There can be hypoplasia of the bone marrow, that is, depression of the bone marrow hematopoietic activity. It can be idiopathic. Hypoplasia of the bone marrow can be idiopathic, means there is no known cause for decreased activity of the bone marrow. And in most cases of thrombocytopenia, there is no known cause and it is said to as idiopathic thrombocytopenia. Or the hyperplasia of the bone marrow can be drug induced. Or there can be infiltration of the bone marrow due to tumors like leukemia or myeloma. Second cause can for decreased platelet count can be increased consumption or increased destruction of the platelets in the blood, and it can occur in case of disseminated intravascular coagulation or viral and bacterial infections which can cause destruction of the platelets resulting in thrombocytopenia. And the third cause can be hypersplenism. In hypersplenism, there is excessive removal of the platelets from the circulation resulting in thrombocytopenia. So these are different causes of decreased platelet count in the blood. Now, the signs and symptoms of thrombocytopenia may include prolonged bleeding from the cuts, bleeding from the gums, or bleeding from the nose, that is epistaxis, or there can be blood in the urine or stools. There can be heavy menstrual flow in females, and there is fatigability, easy fatigue, or feeling of tiredness. So most of the features of thrombocytopenia, they may resemble hemophilia, but we can differentiate it from hemophilia by certain features which include the following. Now, in case of thrombocytopenia, spleen may be enlarged. So, this is one of the differentiating feature from hemophilia. Then there is another important point that in case of the thrombocytopenia, bleeding usually occur from small vessels like venules, capillaries, rather than from large vessels. Whereas in case of hemophilia, bleeding usually occur from large vessels. So in case of thrombocytopenia, bleeding is usually from the small vessels like venules and capillaries, while in case of hemophilia, the bleeding is from large vessels. And in thrombocytopenia, there may be spontaneous bleeding, but in case of hemophilia, usually spontaneous bleeding does not occur, and prolonged bleeding usually occur after some trauma. In thrombocytopenia, there is bleeding into the skin, and this results in formation of pinpoint sized reddish purple spots which are known as petechiae. Now, these petechial rashes are not formed in case of hemophilia. Petechial rash or pinpoint hemorrhages occur in case of thrombocytopenia. Then in case of thrombocytopenia, there is failure of the clot to retract. We know that clot retraction is the function of platelets. The contractile proteins in the platelet contract and they cause the clot retraction and oozing of the serum from the clot. In case of thrombocytopenia, clot retraction does not occur. Now, due to formation of small punctate hemorrhages throughout the body, there is a formation of purplish blotches on the skin, and because of formation of these purplish blotches on the skin, the disease is called as thrombocytopenic purpura. Now, bleeding usually does not occur in case of thrombocytopenia until the count decreases below 50,000 per microliter, and if the count decreases below 10,000 microliter, it is lethal. Now, treatment is to give the either the fresh whole blood transfusion, or we can also give platelet transfusion, and so splenectomy is also helpful in certain situation because spleen removes the platelets. So if splenectomy is done, the removal of platelets from the circulation is decreased, so it might help. Now this diagram shows us the petechial hemorrhages which are formed in case of the thrombocytopenia. There is also another important point to remember, that in most of the cases these petechial hemorrhages are formed in the lower limb. So here we can see in the leg the petechial hemorrhages, small pinpoint hemorrhages are formed throughout the skin, and these are the petechial hemorrhages formed only in the skin of the abdomen. Now this is the purpura. Purplish spots are formed because of the hemorrhages, because of the bleeding into the superficially into the skin. Again, this is the diagram showing you the petechial hemorrhages and purpura in the lower limb of patient with thrombocytopenia. Now, from examination point of view, both the hemophilia and thrombocytopenia are very important. And in the exam on this topic, usually the question is a case scenario, and you have to diagnose the condition, whether the patient is having the hemophilia or the patient is having thrombocytopenia. So here I have given one example of case scenario, and I will discuss with you how to interpret the scenario. So scenario is of a 2-year-old boy who had a fall from the chair. Due to fall from the chair, he developed a swelling of the right shoulder and the upper arm. When this child was brought to the hospital, and on examination and investigation, it was found that there is hematoma, that is collection of blood in the right shoulder. There is no previous history of surgery or trauma or the medications that can cause prolonged bleeding or decrease the clotting. Now, when hematoma was aspirated, it was followed by profuse bleeding. Look, this is the whole scenario, and the last point is very important. This is very important and helpful in differentiating it from the thrombocytopenia. Mother stated that the boy's cousin had a similar bleeding problem. Now, when we talked about hemophilia, the first point that we discussed was that it is a congenital problem and it runs in families. So, in case when there is a scenario of hemophilia, in the history it is mentioned that a cousin or an uncle in the family also has the same problem, and it is always a male patient, and in the history a male family member is always is having the problem. So because hemophilia exclusively occur in males, but in case of thrombocytopenia, it can occur both in males and females. So gender is also very important in helping us to differentiate the two conditions. Secondly, uh, this is, and again, the fall from the chair. Fall from the chair is not a very big trauma, but it resulted in excessive bleeding into the shoulder joint. So this is, and in case of thrombocytopenia, there is no bleeding into the joints or swelling of joints. Instead, there is bleeding into the skin and formation, or there is formation of petechial hemorrhages and blotches. So these points will help us in differentiating the thrombocytopenia from the hemophilia. So this is the case of hemophilia. Now, again, a comparison of thrombocytopenia and hemophilia so that you can become more clear, and and in future, when there is a case scenario, you can easily differentiate that which condition the subject is having. So, thrombocytopenia, as we discussed, there is a low level of platelet in the blood. So, if investigations are given in the scenario, so platelet count, low platelet count indicate towards the thrombocytopenia. While in case of hemophilia, platelet count will be normal, and it will be mentioned that there is deficiency of factor 8 or the factor 9. And in case of thrombocytopenia, bleeding time will be prolonged, while in case of hemophilia, there will be prolongation of the clotting time. So in case of thrombocytopenia, there is bleeding from the small capillaries and venules, and this will result in formation of pinpoint hemorrhages in the skin. And in case of hemophilia, there is large vessel bleed, and it is usually into the joints, resulting in formation of hematomas. Or the bleeding can also occur bleeding can also occur from after the tooth extraction. So prolonged bleeding after tooth extraction can also be there in the history in case of hemophilia. Thrombocytopenia is not a genetic disorder. We already discussed, while the hemophilia is a genetic disorder. So there is always a family history in this scenario, which is for the hemophilia. In case of thrombocytopenia, there is no gender predisposition. Both male and females are equally affected, while the hemophilia is exclusively present in males. So that's how you can differentiate between the hemophilia and thrombocytopenia. Again, to show you the clinical picture comparison of the platelet deficiency, that is the thrombocytopenia, and for the deficiency of clotting factors, that is hemophilia. So there is hematoma here. You can see in the joints there is swelling, while in case of the platelet deficiency, there is formation of petechial hemorrhages, small pinpoint hemorrhages, and these large bruises are known as purpura. Now, with this, we have finished the conditions that lead to prolonged bleeding in humans. Now, we will move on to the other group of disorders of bleeding, which are the thromboembolic conditions in the human being. Now, thromboembolism can occur either because of the roughened endothelial surfaces, or it can be due to the sluggish blood flow. So, these are the risk factors, or we can say the causes of thromboembolism. Now, sluggish blood flow can occur because of the immobility, one of the risk factor. Immobility will cause stasis of the blood flow. Decreased blood flow can cause contact activation of different clotting factors, and as well as the contact activation of the platelets. Or the stasis of the blood or sluggish blood flow can also occur in congestive cardiac failure, and there can be other reasons that we have discussed in the previous lecture. Then roughened endothelial surface can also cause thrombosis and embolism. Due to roughness of the endothelium, there is contact activation of the factor 12 and the platelets. So clotting is initiated, and there is clot formation. Now, the clot which is formed in the blood vessel will grow in the direction of flowing blood. Now, as long as this clot will remain attached to the wall of the vessel, this is known as thrombus. So, thrombus क्या है? Thrombus is the clot which is attached to the wall of the vessel, and when the clot disengage, it dislodges and it flows freely within this circulation, then this clot is known as embolus. I am repeating it again, that thrombus is a clot which is attached to the wall of the vessel, and embolus is the clot which has disengaged, which has dislodged from the wall of the vessel, and it is flowing freely within the circulation. Now, treatment is to give the tissue plasminogen activator which cause clot lysis. Next is disseminated intravascular coagulation. In disseminated intravascular coagulation, there is activation of clotting mechanisms in widespread areas of the circulation. Now, disseminated intravascular coagulation can occur either when there is large amount of traumatized tissue or dying tissue in the body. Traumatized tissue or the dying tissue, it causes the release of large amount of tissue factor, and tissue factor causes the activation of the extrinsic pathway of clotting and formation of thrombin and formation of fibrin, and the clot formation will begin. Or disseminated intravascular coagulation can also be caused by the endotoxin. If there are widespread bacterial infection and septicemia, there is release of the toxic substances by the bacteria, which are known as endotoxins, and these endotoxins damage the endothelium, and damage to the endothelium caused by these endotoxin causes the activation of clotting mechanisms. Numerous clots are formed, and these clots can plug the small blood vessels and resulting in ischemia of the tissues. Now, this flow chart shows us the pathogenesis of disseminated intravascular coagulation. There are two things going on. One is the release of tissue factor because of trauma to the tissues or because of presence of dying tissue, and there is endothelial damage caused by the endotoxins. Now, this causes activation of the clotting cascade, coagulation cascade, as well as the activation of the platelets. So, there is widespread intravascular coagulation resulting in formation of thrombosis. And when there is widespread thrombosis within the body, this is going to cause consumption of the clotting factors. Due to consumption of the clotting factors, they become deficient, and the patient can have secondary bleeding tendencies. And secondly, due to multiple thrombosis, due to thrombosis in the wide areas of the body, there is vascular occlusion, and this can lead to tissue ischemia. So, this is the pathophysiology of the disseminated intravascular coagulation. Now, due to the consumption of the clotting factors, this is a very important feature that the patients of disseminated intravascular coagulation, they begin to bleed. As I just told you, secondary tendencies can be there for bleeding to occur. The investigations include the platelet count, doing the platelet count, determining the prothrombin time, APTT, fibrinogen levels, fibrin degradation products, clotting time. So these are the different tests which can be done, which are basically the coagulation profile test for the patient. And treatment is to correct the dehydration, and treatment of the shock. If the patient is having a circulatory shock, then platelet count should be maintained above 50,000. We can give fresh frozen plasma. Heparin can be given to prevent the clotting, and most importantly is the treatment of underlying condition, the condition which is making the person prone to disseminated intravascular coagulation. So that's all for today. With this, we have finished the topic of blood, and in the next lecture, we are going to start with a new unit in physiology. Thank you so much.